Yields back. Now recognize the gentleman from Florida, Mr. Moskowitz. For 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My amendment today would prohibit the executive branch from using federal funds to eliminate FEMA, transfer its responsibilities to another agency, or reduce its staffing or funding in a way that impairs its ability to fulfill its statutory functions unless expressly authorized by Congress. In fact, my amendment today just says again what's in the Stafford Act and what's in the Homeland Security Act, which was passed after Katrina. The president was right that FEMA needs reform.
Hey folks, welcome back to True Voice, where we cut through the noise and speak truth to power. I'm Andrew, and if you're tired of corporate media spin and want bold, honest, progressive takes, make sure you hit that subscribe button and tap the bell so you never miss a video. Congressman Jared Moskowitz just delivered one of the most urgent and brutally honest speeches I've seen in a long time. The man's literally trying to save FEMA, the agency we depend on when the world goes sideways. And he's doing it by calling out his own party and a DHS that seems to be asleep at the wheel. Let's watch.
Let me say this again. The president was right that FEMA needs reform, as the chairwoman knows from her experiences in North Carolina after Hurricane Helene. But the Secretary of Homeland Security is dead wrong that FEMA should be deleted. First of all, the Secretary is in violation right now of the Stafford Act and in violation of the Homeland Security Act. The Secretary has no ability to pause all grants, which she has done. She has no ability to transfer any of the appropriations or restructure FEMA as she's done. Both of those are in direct violation of the Stafford Act and the Homeland Security Act that was passed after Katrina. So grants are paused. What does that mean, that all grants are paused? That means states right now that are going into hurricane season don't know whether or not they're going to get a declaration, which this administration is holding back. What happens if you don't get a declaration? Just go ask the governor of Arkansas, Governor Huckabee, who worked for the president. It took her weeks to get a declaration. You can't move, you can't respond, you can't spend money because you don't know that you're going to get reimbursed. Fiscally constrained cities and counties don't make decisions. It's analysis paralysis. It's actually in direct contradiction with what we're trying to do. We're trying to speed up FEMA. We're trying to make it faster, right? Which is why I have a bill with Byron Donalds to get FEMA out of Homeland Security. Homeland is disabusing FEMA. They're using FEMA to do grants for the other 22 agencies. That's why we got to get FEMA away from Homeland Security. They're not paying vendors. You know what happens when we don't pay vendors? They can't pay subcontractors. They're not going to be ready to perform in hurricane season. They fired 30% or got them to retire of the workforce in FEMA. Most of the senior people with that experience. You got regional offices in FEMA now that are half empty. By the way, remember that DOGE, remember the E at the end of DOGE, the word efficiency? Nothing at FEMA has been made more efficient. In fact, I would tell you that the Secretary of Homeland Security has turned FEMA into the Newark airport, okay? It is going to fail this summer. And so look, there's no doubt that FEMA needed reform, but what they've done at Homeland is they've taken something that needed help and they broke it further. Do you know what happens if there's no FEMA to the state that the Speaker represents or Steve Scalise represents? Louisiana goes bankrupt without FEMA when there's a hurricane that comes in from the Gulf of Mexico or the Gulf of America, comes right into Louisiana. They're bankrupt. Alabama's bankrupt. Mississippi's bankrupt. You get an F5, F4 tornado in Tornado Alley, those states go bankrupt without FEMA. And yet, I don't see my Republican colleagues calling out the administration on how we're going to save FEMA and reform it. Let me say this. I think the Secretary of Homeland Security has exposed the president in significant ways. And I'm not in the business of protecting the president, but I am in the business of protecting the American people and the country. I don't think the president is aware of the current condition of FEMA and its potential inability to perform. We may get lucky, and hopefully we do. Hopefully we don't have a bad hurricane this season. Hopefully we don't have some unforeseen disaster like an earthquake that hasn't happened since the 90s. Lord knows we had a 1 in 100-year pandemic in the first term of the Trump administration. Hopefully we don't have anything like that, because they have decimated FEMA in ways that we won't know until it happens. And listen, I know the chairwoman represents an area that didn't have the best experience after Helene. There's no question about that. There's dramatic improvement that needs to be done at FEMA. But I'm deeply concerned what's happened at Homeland. And I don't think the president is aware the current condition that the secretary has put him and the men and women that work there and the states that are going to go to FEMA and rely on them to help them in their time of need. And those resources are going to come slower. Think about it. You don't get to move your logistics. You don't get to move your water, your ice, your power generation, any of your stuff. And let me remind you, I did this for a living. For a Republican governor, I worked for Ron DeSantis for 2.5 years, took my political hat off. So I'm not giving you partisan coverage. I'm giving you the current state of affairs in an agency that has been absolutely destroyed. And with that, Madam Chairwoman, I yield back.
That right there? That's the sound of a warning siren. FEMA grants are paused in the middle of an active climate crisis, right before hurricane season. You don't pause FEMA. You reform it. You fund it. You make it faster. But you don't gut it and leave working families in small towns twisting in the wind. 30% of FEMA's workforce gone. These aren't bureaucrats pushing paper. These are seasoned responders. The folks who know how to get water, power, and shelter to people in crisis. This is an intentional kneecapping of a critical agency, and it's happening under our watch. Left, right, center, we should all be furious about this. He's right. Without FEMA, states like Louisiana and Mississippi go bankrupt after a disaster. And let me be crystal clear, this is not a red state versus blue state issue. This is about whether the federal government does its job when the next hurricane, wildfire, or flood hits. This is about basic survival. Look, I may lean left. I believe in a government that protects people, not profits. But I also believe in accountability, and right now the Department of Homeland Security is failing us. Moskowitz is out here fighting for transparency, competence, and most of all, for the American people. He's not pulling punches. He's saying the quiet part out loud. FEMA is being dismantled, and nobody in power seems to be taking it seriously. So here's the deal. If we don't start defending institutions that actually help people, we're going to see lives lost and communities devastated when the next disaster strikes. I stand with Moskowitz on this. Not because he's a Democrat, but because he's telling the truth and fighting for what's right. That's it for today, folks. If you care about people over politics and truth over talking points, smash that like button, drop your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe to True Voice. Until next time, stay loud, stay proud, and keep fighting for a country that takes care of its own. Peace.